Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. And welcome to video number 51 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Well, it's time to do some housekeeping. You know, if you eat dinner, somebody's got to do the dishes, and it's time to pick the studio up a little bit, make some room, get rid of these stands, put them back in storage, because we got to have room for this big angel die that's coming in. So got most everything moved around, and we'll put these two pieces of stone, this old abandoned die and this other piece of small that I'm saving for some project, I don't know. And I'll put it under that slab, turn it across the back, and make a work table right here so we can put the model on it, because when the model's laid on the table here to point, the 2/3 model, the triangle will be right here. And ideally, the stone will be right here, and it'll be between the suctions. So I'll have both suctions for the best reach. I can use whichever one works instead of having to drag everything all over the place. And then I should have just a couple of steps from the model to the job to the triangle. It should all be within just a few steps, so I don't have to travel much, or I only have to travel to sharpen tools. So, but that's the plan. I thought you'd like to see a raked up floor, and obviously my workbench is pretty cluttered right now. I've got a lot stuck on it, need to put some things away. But to move things around, it's working pretty good. I did a little more work on the angel, on the model, because as we studied it, I got away for a little bit, studied it, and I was concerned with the foreshortening, because there will be a little bit of foreshortening because this isn't a full round job. These wings are going to be forward of where they'd be if this was full round and they were pushed back. And I was really concerned that her head was, where the way it was turned and tipped before, it was too close to this wing. And once I blew this up to full size, I was afraid it would really show that this is foreshortened, and I wanted to create a greater amount of separation. So I turned her head to look, well, not quite straight ahead, but just a little bit to her right, and to make it more vertical. And that, you know, you've got the curve of the wing and the curve of her face, so that helps frame her face really well, even on both sides. But it also will create a little more gap. Modified the bust as well, and we'll get those together here. I want to get started on putting rubber on them. But laying her down gives you a really good chance to inspect how she looks, and everything looks really well. She's got a nice flow, a nice posture. The way I've got her head tipped works really well with the draper and the overall composition. And in reality, she's going to be above eye level because this is a 6 foot tall stone. So the top of her head will be 6 feet off the base, which is another foot tall, which makes the top of her head 7 feet. And so if she's installed on any type of a rise, you're going to be looking up to her. So the perspective is going to be like this. That's what you've got to make sure you hit the money, so that you've got a vantage point that works. So, time to start making old man work. Got to move the crane around, move some stones, set this up. We'll be back in a few minutes. And through the magic of video, I wish it was this easy. Moved some stones back, got her laid out, and I went ahead and put just some plastic over this slab, just to keep it clean so I don't get clay in it and get any of the oil from the clay or plaster or silicone, because I'm going to go ahead and rubber her up right here, and then we'll be able to use a crane to lift. I'm going to try to do a 2-piece mother with this that bolts apart at least a couple pieces, and I've got to do a little bit of extra figuring for this extended arm. But turn her face up a little bit, got that eye straightened out. And so it's nice to have room to work in the studio. And then reworked her a little bit. She's looking pretty good, I think. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of, I don't know, 2x4, something here. Add a little bit of height. And then I'm going to finish up this bust. Get her shoulders out where they need to be, you know, twice the width of her head and all that stuff. Get this all put together and set out right. And finish this cape, because we may display this bust. So I've got to get her shoulders straightened out, because right now they're not scaled the right way. So I'll start putting some wood on there and we'll be back. Okay, I've been working on doing a little extra on the angel. We're still on a portrait, the 1-to-1 model. Still waiting on the stone. It was promised. Wasn't ready. And so, you know, I don't know what's going on. I've called other companies and they, this is reality. This is what I'm trying to show y'all. You know, this isn't just a magical thing where I make tons of money just because I know what to do. I have to fight for every dollar I make. And we've been waiting for a long time for this stone, and we've been told a lot of things, and for the most part, none of it's panning out. I've talked with other companies about sourcing the stone. I get it from 1,000 miles away, and then that's going to wreck the budget, because the budget's not figured to transport the stone an extra 1,000 miles. And customer's not going to just pony up more money, which means I'm going to have to pay for it, and that's not in the budget either. So, I'm working on this because we're going to have another open studio event next year, and I'll have to have something. I'd like to have something to display, and so I would have had to have figured out a way to make the base of this portrait model pretty if I decide to put it in. And so I went ahead and I'll do a fancier plinth on it. Now, a little background on these plinths. I'm using clay tools. One of the tools you'll use like crazy to get caught up. I put a rectangular cross section vertical and then a smaller one horizontal, and then put a little bit of clay in the middle, packed it in with a rounded tool. Now this tool is about the same as my fingers, but I can do things to this that I can't do with my finger. I can't take my finger off and turn it and get it away from the rest of my hand to reach things. So I can reach things with that tool. The same thing with this little spatula. I can reach areas that I really couldn't reach otherwise because of the curve. And you're not going to know what tools really work for you the best until you do some of this. And then as you do it, you'll figure out there's some tools that you use a lot, some tools that you never use, and some tools that really surprise you. And having one shaped like your finger, because you already know what you can do with your finger, but you can't always put your finger where it needs to go. So, but one of the things about these bases, to do a plinth like this, it's pretty typical to do a rounded edge on the bottom, at the joint, at the very bottom. And that's to avoid chipping. A little history background on busts like this. Back before photographs, if people had the ability, they could either afford it or knew how to do it or whatever, they would have, you know, you've all seen busts of Julius Caesar and all the famous people, and then there's lots and lots of busts of other people that may not have been a Caesar but were obviously well-to-do. It was traditional at one time in history to have busts of people in the family. It's like you'd have a drawing or a painting of them, because there weren't photographs, and so that was the only way that you could remember these people. And supposedly they'd have family functions, you know, along the way, you know, for holidays or marriages or celebrations or whatever. And if they had a bust of, you know, Grandpa Fred that was dead, they'd bring it out in order to, out of its special place where it normally stayed, and they could include it there where they were eating or celebrating or whatever. And that would be a way to honor and include past family members and to reinforce family. And so there was a reason, because if you have this edge square, all that handling, you tend to chip it. You don't want to chip it, you want it to last forever and look good. So they would have it be rounded. And when we cut a stone, we typically put something for a bevel. We break that edge so it's not a sharp 90. We try to put something on there to break it a little bit so it's not quite as fragile. And that's pretty normal. But for this to go on a show, I would have had to do something like I did with that little memento out of clay, and we would have had to figure out a way to make it look like it was suitable to go in an art gallery. This is a working model. This isn't art in itself. This is a means to an end. And so the goal is to have it look good, but I don't need to go finish it, and I don't need to go crazy trying to make everything perfect on it. But now that I've got a little cove, I can work to round this off a little more. Try to make it look a little more elegant. And I'm not worried about making this exquisite and finishing it to the very end. I want it to look like it's clay, like it was clay, and we'll have all of it done up. But I've got to get going so I can start running rubber on this. And we'll have to do a little more complicated mold on this piece instead of just splitting it off and whatever, because I put a little more effort into her than what we had originally discussed. But we got the time, so might as well go ahead and do this good. This should be a really good lesson. One of the things I wanted to make sure to include on this bust is that her nipples, the distance of her head down is right at the edge here. And then her nipples are going to be just inboard, a little less than the head. Usually they're not splayed quite that far. But I've got enough material here and here, and I'll probably still put a metal armature to stick up here in order to have those to point to instead of trying to drill near the edge. Went ahead and contoured a little bit more, did more with her shoulders, and have got the bulk of that hand on there. I don't need to put certain amounts of detail. Now, she looks kind of wore out in terms of her surface on her face because the clay holds all these lines and sweeps, and it also handles light very, very differently than plaster or granite. And that's one of the reasons I like to do it in all these different media, is because it helps me study the shape, study the form, study the composition, and understand it, because I can see what she looks like. She looks like she's very old in terms of her skin. She looks like she has very leathery, very distressed skin, like she got too much sun. Not the wrinkles, but it just doesn't look like soft skin. And there's no reason in the world for me to go through this with some type of a brush or to a tool of some type to pounce this face, to dab it and pucker it all up to make it look more like skin with pores, because I'm not going to carve all that stuff. I want the primary shape. I'll finish it with a chisel when I carve it. This is one of the reasons it's so important to do models for your own work if you're the one that's going to be carving it, because there's a lot of sculptors that work in plastic media that don't understand that, and you can put extensive amounts of wrinkles in skin and all that, and you can do it in granite as well, but you're probably not going to get paid for it. And if you're going to spend 2 or 3 months doing a little fiddly work to prove you can do it for free, somebody's got to be paying the bill. So, not saying you can't do it, but whether it's justified by the project, you know, that's more of the concern. And put lazy Susans on your model and stands. They cost very, very little to go buy one. Even if you gotta go buy one brand new, just get a lazy Susan. It doesn't have to be a big heavy duty one. And you don't have to leave it on your stand. You can even have a lazy Susan mounted between two pieces of plywood that you can screw the plywood to your stand, and then you can take it off real easy so you can use it in other places in your studio. I've got one or two like that. One of the things that works really, really good, it's hanging up. And you can get them for junk or old speaker cones that you get from, you know, your great big speakers in the back of your car or whatever. Those metal stands that look kind of like a big funnel or a hat or something. You can flip those upside down and they make a tremendous stand for a lazy Susan to set on a work table. And it gives you the elevation, and they're very stable, and they're just really nice. So, but yeah, this is getting pretty close, and pretty happy with the way it looks. So, really thrilled to see how many people are joining up, subscribing. I'm really looking forward to cutting this stone. I'm kind of bummed it's not here because the weather is, we're going into fall and the weather is just exquisite. The air is great, the weather's great, and this is when I was really looking forward to having the stone here to be able to work. But it'll get here eventually. There's a reason it's not here yet, and I could go raging wild or try to figure out what that reason is. And so I'm just gonna try to make sure that once it gets here, everything's done as well as possible. So when you do this and you get your different aspects somewhat even, you'll find out that they make a lot more sense. They don't have to be perfect, but there'll be nothing that's distracting. And they'll end up that the inconsistencies or the unevenness are more likely to be intrinsic than distracting. And that's a good thing. So, but I hope that when you start carving stone, you don't use that type of reasoning as an excuse to not finish what you're doing and leave it all rough, because way too many people leave stuff rough. And, you know, Michelangelo all that stuff rough because he never finished it. He didn't leave it rough, you know, because he wanted to go out and have you scratching your head. He died. Okay, he had a lot of stuff going on. He didn't finish the pieces and he died. He didn't do them halfway and then say, "Yep, that's finished." He figured it out. I don't understand. From what I understand, that's not what he did. Do the good work and do it all the way through. And do a good job. So, let's see where this video is. We're pretty close. I got to do just a little bit more tweaking on this, and to get a few more little places cleaned up. And we'll probably break this video off, make it a little bit shorter, and then we can start doing rubber, because rubber's going to take a while on these two jobs, and that was part of why I had to rearrange the studio, was because I kept thinking that the stone was going to be here and I can go ahead and get this done, and it hasn't gotten here yet, and I still got to cast these, and I've got to be able to have them out of the way So by having the stone way at the back, the table way at the back, getting all this other stuff out of the way, we're in better shape. So I think that's probably good for her. I'll do a little bit more on her fabric and everything, but for the most part, I think she's wrapped up. And I think this plinth is pretty good too. So my name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.